What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we are doing what I hope is going to be a short Toronto Regionals Pokemon TCG metagame discussion with a few players here, all joining me from Canada. If y'all would like to introduce yourselves real quick.
Hi, my name's Andre. I'm from Canada, and this is my house, and I have some friends here.
My name is Cyrus Davis. I live in this house as well, and I am currently #1 ranked in Canada instead of Andre.
I'm not
Awesome.
even top 10, I don't think. I'm way down bad.
My name is Frank Persick. I play Pokemon, and I'm from Ohio, but I'm currently crashing in Canada, getting ready for this tournament.
Nice.
Joined by...
I'm Joe Cornell. I'm here with Frank. I'm happy to be along for the ride. I'm a newer player than these guys.
Awesome. Okay, so last week we just had the Sao Paulo Internationals, the LAIC. Show of hands, who was there? Okay,
Just me.
just Cyrus. Okay. So Lugia was roughly a quarter of the day 1 metagame, and it was over 50% of the day 2 metagame. So I wanted to start out with some general opinions on that. Was it the best deck? Did all the best players play it? Or some combination of those two things? Let's start with Cyrus, since you were the only one that attended the event, and or the only person here. Obviously, thousand plus people attended the event. So what did you play at the event? How did you do? And then answer the question of, was it the best deck? Did all the best players play it, or both?
So I'm gonna start off with saying both. I played Lugia. Same 58. Like me, Tord, Gustavo, Henry, Stefan. I think like a bunch. Like there were like 12 of us all playing the same like 58 cards. I think like the story I heard from so many players, so many of the people who played Lugia as well to the event, was they showed up the day before the event, intending to test a bunch with a bunch of other good players and figure out a deck that beat Lugia, and then once they played against good players, it was like nearly impossible to beat Lugia consistently. So everyone just like defaulted to playing Lugia. That was like sort of the general consensus. So I think it's a combination of, it's like the best deck. It's like super hard to find any deck that can like counter it. And also obviously like most of, the names like Tord, like who could you have predicted if you had to pick a person if you were required to bet money on who would win the tournament, who would you pick, right? Tord, and Tord played Lugia.
Right.
So it's obviously is a combination of the best players played Lugia. Like who knows, maybe if Tord played something else, he could have still won the tournament. But I think it is a combination of like, it was the best choice for the event, and generally is likely to for the most part in this meta be the best choice, as well as the best players did end up playing it, which probably also skewed the results.
Right. Yeah, and looking down the line, just even if we stop at looking at top 32 on the Limitless page, like if you kind of cover the decks and just look at the names, almost every name you would pick out did play Lugia, and there also were just so many Lugias, so most of the time you're going to be correct, except Sander. I would have said, okay, Sander played Control, but all these other people probably Lugia. So Frank, let me ask you this follow-up question. So for the first major event of a new tournament, a lot of people will play a consistent version of the best deck, which is what, as we just discussed, a lot of top players did. For EUIC, you went into that event with the Whimsicott V-Star deck and did really well with it. So I would like to hear, do you think you would have also ended up on Lugia if you went to LAIC last weekend?
Yeah, 1000%. I'm still trying to figure out what to play in this meta. I'm trying to be creative. I like have like unique ideas, but it's like you just send it up against Lugia and it's so good. Like there's always something that you can exploit about a deck, but Lugia is just so consistently strong, and it's so like variable. Like you can play a bunch of one prizers, and because you can play Aurora Energy, there's so many different things you can tech and so many different variables to account for, there's always like one aspect of their deck that will just like run over what you're trying to do. And it's just so consistent at setting up, and the ability of Archeops is just like accelerating any type of special energy from the deck is just so powerful that you can afford to play literally some of the most broken attacks in the game. Obviously, like Amazing Rare Yveltal. And the fact that you can play all these crazy Pokemon, it's just so hard to find something that can deal with everything that Lugia has in it. So it's really hard to play. So given, you know, we don't know what's going on up until Brazil, like finding something that can deal with that meta is one thing. But then even now that I'm struggling, that we know we have like kind of more of a solidified meta, like we have a better idea of like what techs are people going to include and how are people going to build the list. Even though I can look at all of that, it's still just so hard to find a deck that can consistently beat that because of how diverse it is. So being able to do that, you know, into a new format, like where you don't know exactly how people are going to choose to play it, is just so difficult. And I think the thing now is too, like even looking towards Toronto, like, and I saw this on Twitter earlier, somebody said, like you can find a deck that beats Lugia, but it's the trouble is beating it and like Mew and Lost Box and everything. You can tailor your deck so hard to beat all the little things that Lugia is going to include, like Yveltal and Statland and all this stuff. But then, like, okay, you've spent all of these resources beating this one deck, and there are other decks in the format, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So
I think
just
I quote retweeted one of Jake Gearhart's many Lugia counter tweets and said like, because like there are many just like single prize decks. You can build like the liminal deck. You can play Beedrill stuff. Like you can play a deck that is pretty favorable into exactly Lugia, and then you come up against any of the other single prize decks, or specifically Lost Zone box, but not just Lost Zone. You can come up against other V and VMAX based decks and V-Star based decks that are not exactly Lugia, and since you have to really dial in so specifically to beat Lugia, like you said, it has so much adaptivity and it's very variable what the deck is going to have in it, then you're all of a sudden not very good against a large other chunk of the field. I think the Zorak Stage 1 box is a great example of that, because Zorak Stage 1s, it might not be like 100-0 against Lugia, but it's at least a favorable against Lugia in theory, favorable against Mew in theory, but then like you just scoop to a lost box.
Really interesting observation is that because we didn't have rotation at the normal time, like this format that we're playing in has the largest standard card pool that we've had in so long.
Yeah, we're playing in a super format, so like Lugia V,
so
like the decks that are good are really, really good. Is that what you were
not
gonna say?
Even that, but like the decks that are good, probably the two best decks are very obviously Lugia and Lost Box, and then Mew is somewhere in there. But the reason that those two decks are so good is because, like you're saying, they have just so much variability that you can build with, right? Like Lost Box, there's a bajillion different ways to build it, and that's why it's so good, because it's like a deck that can play a bunch of single prizers, just like Lugia plays a bunch of single prize attackers, and can play any type that they want, because they can just accelerate whatever type of energy and do all these different things. And I think because of that, that's just why they're the strongest decks. And you're not going to find anything that can really do that as well. And it's something that can counter that so hard, because again, there's so much variance, and it's just a single deck archetype, let alone 9 rounds of it, right?
Who has something to say off of what Frank said?
I have just something that was almost exactly what I wanted to say. Is I think what's scariest about Lugia and just the Lost Zone engine in general. I talked about it a bit when like Comfy first came out in Mirage Gate, where they're like, it basically enables any card to be playable. Similar like when Arceus first came out and people were like, oh, now like every V Pokemon is like viable, right? Because it has some form of energy acceleration. Basically, Lugia makes every single card viable to an extent, because every single energy can be like any type of special energy can be accelerated. Mirage Gate allows nearly any card to be viable. Like if you told me a couple months ago that like Amazing Rare Yveltal and Kyogre from Celebrations, like if you told me months ago like the Kyogre from Celebrations would be the reason I stopped playing Mew VMAX, I would not believe you.
Right, that like Tord and Grant Manley are playing these cards at an international.
Yeah, but and they're insanely good. And like where does it end, right? Like first it was like, I think like the Rayquaza was the first one that I saw where I'm like, okay, people are starting to realize that like there's 1,000,001 ways to play these decks. I think at the beginning it's consistency and then they're like kind of like the floodgates open, right? Where we figure out all these different ways to play it, and then eventually near the end of a format before the next set comes out or there's a rotation, then it's like, okay, this is 100% the way to play it.
Yeah, and especially because we're as close as a standard format has been to expanded in like almost like so long.
Yeah.
And like I think when we were looking at like a Lost Box deck that before that like only needed one type of energy, and it's like, what do you play for the second energy? And it's like, well, we could just throw in a random energy, but there's no way in this entire card pool there's not one card that could use that second energy, because there's like you can power up literally any single basic
why
Pokemon
not
in this
just
format.
play it?
Like, yeah, especially Pokemon, like literally any single basic Pokemon in this format you can power up turn 2 basically with Mirage Gate or Lugia.
Yeah, and there's also like a lot of Pokemon like Radiant Charizard. Like you can throw Radiant Charizard in a fire energy in any deck and just slap it down on the last turn.
The last thing I want to say about this is I was explaining it to Emma yesterday. Like she's getting back, she's playing this regional but hasn't been playing a lot of standard. I said
Your wife
that,
for context.
oh yeah, Emma's my wife for
Okay.
context. Thanks, Frank.
Great, good context.
It's like the Charizard is not like Charizard in a lot of other decks like before Silver Tempest was like one of the best cards in the deck, and like in Lugia it's like, oh, it's pretty good. Like
yeah,
like it's great you have it, but like
There's no amazing destruction.
yeah.
So...
Well, like between that and then Lugia is still an insane attacker, right? Stoutland is so good in the deck. Like Charizard's like it's good too.
I have 3 different Pokemon that I can one-shot almost anything with on turn 2.
yeah. It's like you're just cycling out broken Pokemon after broken Pokemon in this deck, and that's like Frank was saying originally, like there's so many things that can be just tossed into decks that like we have a format where Radiant Charizard isn't even the second most broken Pokemon in the deck.
Yeah. And like talking about the variables of Lugia, like there's so many deck ideas that it's like, okay, I have finally gotten this deck to beat Lugia.
If against anything,
but it's like I find it loses to everything else.
Mhm.
So it usually beats Lugia, maybe 70% of the time, maybe 70% of the time, but only if they don't play a Sharon's Care, a Birdkeeper, or a Raikou, like only random decks that most Lugia lists aren't playing. That some people in like if you hit 9 Lugia, a couple of them are gonna play those random decks, and even though you've tested your deck so much, you're taking auto loss to everything else. You go 70-30 against Lugia. You're still going to take a couple losses to random weird tech cards that Lugia play that you couldn't have accounted for. And the games where Lugia is the most consistent deck and your deck isn't the most consistent deck, and they just go like Marnie, turn 1, okay, you're done.
Yeah. Or like they get an aggressive turn 2 Stoutland.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Joe, so
yeah, we could talk about Lugia and Lost Box forever.
yeah, we could. So Joe, you mentioned you're the newest one in the group here. So what are some questions or fears or uncertainties you have going into the event if you're trying to do well?
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest one obviously is Lugia, but not just what, I would be playing to beat Lugia, because I don't think there is a good answer, or at least not one that we found, a good answer to that. If I end up playing Lugia, which I might, I'm a newer player, it's a very consistent and like very strong deck. I think that wouldn't be a bad choice for me. Just trying to get my first day to even. Just like the mirror match, because you're gonna hit the mirror match so many times, and like trying to figure out what like the best text to have in there that kind of solidify that, and like give you a good chance in the mirror.
So what do the rest of y'all think about that? About like, do you just practice the mirror more than other people and not ruin consistency?
I think so. I mean, I like if you look at Tord's list and like we all settled on like Raikou usually doesn't do enough in the mirror.
Mhm.
This I played like 11 games against Zekrom Metagame yesterday with no counter to it in my Lugia list, and no like lightning attacker of my own. And Yogaloop was used once, and it was relatively 50-50 because like overall most games are just gonna be decided by like you still like sure you can play Zekrom Metagame, you can play this or that, but you still need to get out 2 Archeops turn 2, which is still at a huge advantage by going first. And most of the time, like Lugia can do so much that you can still just outplay your opponent. I do think that like I played 7 mirrors at LAIC, and my only 2 losses were to Brian DeVries, who came 9th with his like very interesting like double evil tell list. And he like V guarded the evil tell so that it couldn't be aqua returned for a knockout. It's very, very like and which is something you can do in the matchup, but it was very, very like his deck was built sort of to have those options. And then I lost to Fabien Pujol, who was playing towards list, same 58 as me, and it just came down to I brick game 1, going first, and then went second, and then went first, and then went second game 3, and just kind of folded.
Just to go back a little bit, because you mentioned Zekrom Metagame, so I'm assuming you mean that you're playing those in your Lugia deck as the mirror counter.
I was playing regular Lugia, and the person I was testing with was playing Zekrom Metagame in their Lugia.
Right, okay, so just for the audience, so Zekrom is going to swing in for not a knockout and paralyze, and then you clean it up with Yoga Loop, and then you next turn get, like, essentially 2 turns in a row, and because of the paralysis. But then that's one of those things you got everybody mentioned, right? Like, if they have a Charon's Care or a Bird Keeper, this strategy's out the window.
Like, and then like that's what I mean. Like even like Lugia, if you play Zekrom Metagame and you say like let's say it did work and it made your mirror like 70-30, because that's as good as you can get your mirror considered when you factor in like
consistency
how often
and
you get out the double Archeops,
right?
And so who's going first. Even then, like, there are techs that are going to ruin it for you, and I don't think it does make the matchup a 70-30. I think in my testing, it was still relatively 50-50. It didn't matter. It was like a cool option, but it made your deck slightly less consistent, and you were taking out other options for it. And it just doesn't always work. Sometimes you use the Zekrom and then you don't have it out to the Metagame. Sometimes you prize a piece. Sometimes it costs too many resources to use so that you pull it off and it looks really good, and then you don't have enough resources.
You struggle into the end game.
The thing that I really like about Lugia is I feel like that it's a deck that rewards strong play. Like if you are a good player, you play the deck well, I think it rewards you quite a bit.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a busted deck that's the best deck in format, but it also is like as pretty skill intensive. Like you're going to be resource managing the entire game. You're going to be lining up your strategies and your prize mapping the entire game. So like as far as like dominant decks at the top of a meta goes, I personally don't mind it too much because I see that skill expression a lot. I do think we've talked about Lugia a lot though. So there are a couple of other decks I hear that are floating around in the metagame. Personally, I'll also tell everybody watching this, I'm going to try to keep my opinions to a minimum. I did write a little blog type article. I'll leave it in the link that you guys can read where I talked about predicting the meta shares and everything. But personally, I feel like Lugia can't go over 30% of the day one meta, because there are people who don't want to pay $200 for a new deck when they just bought Kira Martina or Palkia or Arceus last format. There are also a ton of people that just despise playing the best deck. There are also people like Frank who love making counter decks. So do you guys think that we could have more than 30% of Lugia in day one?
Insanely high number.
I could see 35.
I think there will be more than 30% Lugia.
Really? If you gave me over under on 30 for Lugia, I would hit over. I'd bet the over.
I'd say under. That's
Brazil,
interesting.
After being 30% at Brazil, coming first and second in Brazil, and being more than 50% of the day 2 field in Brazil, and it being 6 of the top 8 spots, beating 2 decks that the people who were playing them thought were counters to it, I think it'll be more than 30% at Toronto.
Yeah, Mew sucks. I think Mew so bad.
Mew loses to every single deck in the top 8. Lost Box can be built to be like 50-50 at best against Lugia, in my opinion. I don't think that Kyogre build is more than that. Control, I actually do think is like very easy for a lot of decks to tech for, and I think that like there's a lot of control hype, but I think everyone knows there's a lot of control hype, which will lead to more control techs.
So I think the next control, like if there's a control that comes out at Toronto, my thought would be it's not going to be the same control as last time. Maybe that'll be Mewtwo V Union again, or
there is something.
I think it's pretty likely that there won't be a lot of people innovating a new control list for Toronto. I think that being that Stuttgart is the same weekend, we will see Sander Wojcik in top 8 of Stuttgart with a different control deck.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
You think
that
he's
is
got
my-
something ready already?
I know that he had other ideas going into Brazil, so I think that we could see Sander in top 8 of Stuttgart.
So Andre, you've played a lot of Mu VMAX in the post-pandemic format. So you wouldn't even touch Mu, consider it for this tournament?
No, I would definitely touch Mew. Like I think the fusion version of Mew actually has a relatively decent matchup. I think all of the sorry, I'm just trying to fix my mic here. All the versions of Mew have a decent matchup into Lugia. But decent is not like I mean I've played Mew in formats where like against Palkia it didn't have a great Palkia matchup, but I still thought Mew was strong. It's just Mew into the Lost Zone decks, like the Mirage Gate Lost Zone decks, are near unwinnable as Mew.
Right.
Whether it's the DTE or the Fusion Strike version, like it just feels like your strategy is to just cheese people with Mew, whatever version it is. Whether you cheese them off a bad start with Meloetta or you cheese them off like Path Marnie over and over again in the DTE one, it just doesn't feel like there's like, and I think Lost Box is positioned like very like relatively well. Right now, if you don't want to play Lugia, I just cannot. The more and more I've thought about it, the less and less I've thought that Mew makes any sense to play over Lugia.
So, let's shift perspective just a bit, and if your answer stays the same, that's perfectly fine. I just want to note this perspective shift. So, Andre, you're somebody who's looking for top 8, winning the event. You know, you want to do really, really well. A lot of the viewers are going to be people going to their first regionals since the pandemic hit, or their first regionals of this season. Some people looking for their first day 2, like Joe. If those people feel comfortable with Mew already, would you say Mew can't get you that day 2?
Oh, Mew can definitely get you day 2. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, because
like, I mean,
yeah, I just wanted to make sure
I don't want to be like I've been thrown into like being the Mew guy, and kind of like I answer a lot of like community questions, like going like up for upcoming events and whether it's viable or what they should change. I think Mew is perfectly fine.
Fine. That's the problem, though. If you're trying to win the whole event, that it's just kind of fine right now.
When I say fine, I don't mean like I think Lugia is a fine play. I don't think Lugia is amazing. I mean, Lugia is fine. I mean, it's acceptable. Like fine for me just means you got the thumbs up. Like it's fine is like a
not
really
bad. I'm not going to rip it out of your hand and tell you can't play.
Ultimately, like if you're a solid player and you play a good regionals and you play a deck that you're comfortable with, like that often, if you play enough, eventually you'll just get day 2, right? You'll have a good day, right? And if I say like, oh, Lost Box is not a really good matchup for you, you may honestly just hit 0 in day 1.
Sure. Yeah. There was somebody at LAIC who only hit 1 Lugia out of 15 rounds. They got 37th, I think, and they hit 1 Lugia in day 1, not in day 2.
That led me to that even recently was at Peoria. Like I haven't played a ton this season, but Peoria I played Palkia and Lost Box. There was an event before? Was Peoria the first one?
That was the first Lost Origin event. Baltimore was before, but then it was Peoria, then Salt Lake City.
It was the first one, but was there a regional before? Did we have anything?
Baltimore.
Yeah, Baltimore.
But that was before Lost Origin.
No, I played Mew.
No, you played Mew.
That's why. But that was that the new format? Was Lost Origin?
No. Baltimore was Worlds format.
Was that the first legal tournament in the world?
In the world,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to like think of what I was thinking at that time. Basically, the bottom line is I played the 70 HP Sobble because I thought it made a dramatic difference against Lost Box, and in 15 rounds I played against 1. And I played against 0 Mew. And I played in between Mew mirrors right beside me the entire tournament. You can play a deck that loses to a top deck and just not hit it. It's possible.
Absolutely.
Like, it happens. I'm not saying that's a good strategy. And in fact, it's not really a good strategy. But to get into day 2, you play a deck you're comfortable with. You get a couple lucky bounces and you play well. That's kind of what it takes to like get past that. You need to play even better, you need to have an even better deck, and you need to get, unfortunately, even a little bit luckier because there's more than 8 phenomenal people who play this game, and it's not the same example. If it was the same person making top 8 and top 16 over and over again with a deck that's not very consistent, I might be a little suspicious, but there's no one who does that, right?
Right. So, okay, so Mew, fine play. Lugia, best deck in format, going to be at least around 30% popularity, probably. Lost Zone Box is going to be kind of popular as well. So, do y'all think that Mirage Gate Lost Box will be more popular than Sablezard, even though Sablezard's easier to play?
I think so. I just don't know if I agree necessarily with one being easier to. Well, yeah, the
Sablezard has a lower skill floor, but they're both extremely capped out in the ceiling.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. I think the Mirage Gate one is actually just like better.
A lot better.
Yeah, Kyogre is really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Rayquaza is bad. I don't like. I think.
I brought up that as an example. I just mean like
I think Mirage Gate's good, but not necessarily any Mirage Gate Lost Box build.
Right.
I mean, like Kyogre's a really good card. There are other very good Mirage Gate decks. I don't think like Rayquaza is very good. You like, but I mean, if you're playing like Rayquaza can still obviously win games. Like Adam Hawkins, I know made day 2 with Rayquaza. I think Tyler Matthews made day 2 at LASC with Rayquaza. I'm sure there were others. Like Rayquaza is a cool card, but you know, like. I do think like Kyogre is the way to go with Mirage Gate in my opinion.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
Any other thoughts on Mew or Lost Box from Frank or Joe?
I think
you've been playing a bit in Mew.
I have been when I went to Baltimore earlier this season, that was going to be my first day too, or that's what I was planning. I mean, they were talking about hitting like decks that you would really expect to hit that you don't hit, like Lost Box. I know Andre was talking about. I had the opposite happen. I only played 5 rounds at Baltimore. I was doing good playing Mew. I hit 2 Darkrai in a row in the first 5 rounds. And just kind of destroyed my run, Other than that, like the deck ran fine, everything ran fine.
Yeah.
Darkrai, U2 control, and I dropped out. I didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, like
because I was.
Don't worry, I lost the winning in with Dark Moltres this year to Rapid Strike and Talion. So
yeah, I lost to Stonejourner at Baltimore. That's my sour grape for Baltimore.
So it's like whatever deck you end up playing.
Something
really,
bad can happen with matchup roulette.
You can't plan for everything at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I definitely I'm going with the deck that I'm going to feel most comfortable with.
So
yeah, and I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Like Joe being the newest player and looking for his first day too. I think that's like that's very very smart, and like other people who is there for like one of their first events or they're going for their first day too should like. I think you should have the same mentality. I personally like Andre saying Mew is fun the same way that Lugia. I know you didn't really mean that like Mew's as good of a play as Lugia.
No, that's not what I meant.
I know it's not what you meant, but like to be clear, if someone I knew that was trying to win the event said, "Do you think I could," or like just wanted safe points from a day 2, and was like I knew was a really good player, said to me, "Do you think it's fine for me to just play Mew?" I probably would say no.
Right.
I probably wouldn't suggest it. I think it because I do think it's like pretty unfavored against everything that made top 8 in Brazil. But like if you are a newer player, you have a lot of practice with one deck. Like especially at the time of watching this, given that today is Thursday and the event is Saturday. When I don't know when this will release. If it will release tomorrow,
it'll probably be like midnight. So y'all will have about 24 hours with this video.
You're not switching decks.
Yeah.
Play what you're comfortable with, and some of you are watching this thinking about switching decks past midnight the night before Toronto. You're not switching decks.
Yeah. I want to add on to that. So that's basically what my advice is to everyone all the time. I don't necessarily know if it's the best advice, but I think confidence and preparation
absolutely
are overall. If you look at just success as a whole, not like winning events. I mean, like if you look at overall conversion to like getting championship points at events, the majority of people getting those are playing something that they practiced a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Or they've been playing for a very, very, very long time and they just have like natural skill. But overall, you're going to be confident in the deck you play and you're prepared. I think for the majority of people, the 99% of people who play the game, that's more important than playing the right deck for the event. As long as you're playing something that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Right.
What I'll
Play
tell
your
my
Butterfree
oh, go ahead, Frank.
anything's possible. I said play your Butterfree VMAX deck. Anything's possible.
Yeah, and ultimately, it depends what you want to get out of the game.
What's your
I
goal for the event is?
yeah.
Yeah, what I'll tell my coaching students is, if there's a list of decks you're considering, tell me which of those you can give me all the matchup conceptualizations for right now. And any of them that you can't do that for, we're taking those off the list. Like,
That's such a good way of looking at
like
it.
if you can tell
Smart.
me how this matchup should or will play out most of the time for the top 5 meta decks playing your deck, then okay, good, we can choose that deck. That's good. And then if you're like that for 3 decks, then let's pick the one that's the best meta call out of those decks that you're comfortable with. That's kind of how I go about it.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that it's so different for like when you're like when I'm testing with a group of players who all like have multiple regional day 2s and they're just trying to win the event, and they tell me that they might switch decks the night before a tournament to something that they haven't played as much, that I'm way more willing to accept that, because like when you've played for so long, like I've been playing for like 10 years, I don't need like some
don't
players
have
can
to-
just give you the matchup conceptualization for every deck without having played it before, right?
Right.
Like I hadn't played Arctina or Arc Gudra until the day before at the regionals that I made day 2 with them this year. But like I knew as soon as my opponent flipped over their cards exactly what my game plan was, because the decks are they're just good, they're consistent, they can do the same thing every game. And you sort of can just like figure it out on the fly, like what your sort of game plan is going to be against X deck.
Yeah.
And that's like why you decide to play the deck, because you can conceptualize all of its matchups without testing them extensively.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you already have that blanket,
that's a different level. That is
right. If you already have
even
that
at
blanket
that,
experience.
even at that, I don't even want to. Wasn't trying to imply that I'm at that level, but I've been playing for a very, very long time. I'm still someone who just whatever I'm most comfortable with. Like I want to be able to like play it like out of my mind every single game perfectly. And if I play, and I'm also going to a ton of tournaments, right? So I can kind of like afford to like have a poor one here and there. But if you're someone who like, especially Canadian players, if you're watching this from Canada, this is like the only regional you're going to, just play what you're gonna have the most fun playing. Like honestly,
Yeah.
that's
And and most of the time, for my experience at least, if you want to have fun but you also would like to do well, you'll have more fun if you know how to play your deck, because you're not going to get frustrated with like if you pick up, oh, well, toured one with this last week, but I've been practicing Curum Palkia for 3 months. You should probably stick to Curum Palkia, you know? Like it's a solid deck that can blow things up. It's not the best deck in format or anywhere near it, but it's also not like a theme deck.
Yeah.
Also, on that note, I read like a Magic the Gathering article a while ago talking about like in a format called Commander, which is a relatively casual format, winning games without actually winning them. Where if this is like the only tournament you're going to this year, and you're going, maybe you're hoping like maybe you can make day 2, but you're not like super confident in yourself, and you're just going to have fun for the most part. Playing a deck that opens up more opportunities for you to make those plays where you play like ridiculously well. You probably should have lost, or you just found like a really cool line that only comes up 1 in 100 games.
Yeah.
And you know what? Whether or not you make day 2, you're gonna be talking about you having made that play for the next for months.
Absolutely.
I still talk about swoop across for 6 prizes all the time.
You're gonna feel on the top of the world
in Toadbat's mirror,
because you know how to play your deck, and you know how to play it so well, and you did this really cool thing, and you know what? You won the tournament you won the tournament for yourself. Like it doesn't matter if you actually won. What's important is that you make those memories and you have a good time, and that you set goals for yourself. Like, if you want to set the goal for yourself to make day 2, that's great, but set other goals for yourself. Set little goals for yourself that you can that
are in your control.
Yeah, exactly. That
yeah.
that don't require any luck.
Right. Yeah. The in your control goals I set is to have fun, have a positive attitude, play a deck that like I said, play a deck that and you can like actually go in with that preparation, and play all 9 rounds is also, aside from like health emergencies and whatnot, obviously, but like set those goals for yourself to have fun, positive attitude, not all 9 rounds, because those are things you can control at the end of the day. And if you get the day 2 out of it, then you get the day 2 out of it. So we've talked about Lugia, Mew, Lost Zone Box. I really think those are the big three. Like if you're going to this event, get a few games in against each of those decks.
Yeah.
Palkia and Teleon. Now, I know they didn't release the full LAIC meta share. They only talked on stream, as far as I know, about Lugia being a little over a quarter of the field. Palkia and Teleon, Cyrus, I know you've played a lot of it. Do you think players that I wrote in my blog that I said I'll link in the description, I wrote like even players who have studied on the mountains for months with Palkia won't be playing Palkia to this event? But do you think there are people that know Palkia so well that'll tech it out with the Articuno and the Sinnoh and whatever? Is Palkia going to be enough of a representation to say it's up there popularity wise with those three we mentioned?
Popularity wise, I honestly don't think so. I think like it takes more than just the seasoned veterans of a deck to make a deck popular. Like the general majority of players, like as soon as they heard that Lugia beat Palkia, have not played any games with Palkia. Like, I do think that like Palkia, I don't think Palkia is like a terrible deck.
Right.
I honestly, personally, if I had the personally had the choice between playing Mew or Palkia for the event, personally I'd probably play Palkia. Because like I feel like I can at least capitalize on like, sure, if my opponent is a really really good Lugia player, they should probably beat me almost every time playing Palkia. Even if I play double Articuno, Raihan, Temple of Sinnoh, like some players did in a play. I at least one player did that made day 2 at Brazil, played double Articuno and Raihan.
Azul just tweeted
but,
a list with double Articuno and emergency jelly in it, so
And some jelly in there too.
Oh yeah, a little jelly.
But like I do feel like I can beat a lot of the Lugia players I play against, because they might make mistakes that I'm gonna be able to capitalize on as someone who is really experienced with Palkia, especially being able to, you know, even if my opponent and I are equally good, I probably have more experience with Palkia than they do with Lugia because Palkia has been around for long.
Right, and Palkia is the kind of deck that allows you to actually go search out those techs. You don't have to just happen into them. Like, so I think that's a good example of, again, saying to stay with your comfort deck, but also if you know a deck really well, it can easily outperform the BDIF in a solid player's hands.
Yeah. Palkia is also just really fun. I think Palkia is one of the most fun decks to play.
I hate playing Palkia.
I think it's fun.
I hate Intellion decks.
Frank, I haven't heard enough from you. Frank.
Yeah. Instead of knowing what you have to get and searching for it, you might go onto it and be like, oh, this was the card I needed.
Barrel, you're in there.
See, why would I Drizzile for one card that I need when I could be barrel into the exact 3 cards?
And it might even have the card that you need in there. It's like the booster box.
You may have not even know you needed those cards.
So
I might. What if I
don't know what to search for?
Yeah, what if I don't know what I need?
exactly.
And I Drizzile for the wrong card?
Yeah, and if I don't get it, it'd be like, oh, I whiffed off the barrel.
And whereas Barrel could just feed it to me.
Yeah.
It's like playing PTCGO, right? Like I be barrel and I draw the 3 cards and then one of them starts glowing and I'm like, oh my
I can play this one.
That's a decision I have to make. Drizzile, that's a decision I have to make. Just
I mean, jokes aside, at the base of it, there is some sort of advantage to having a deck that intrinsically is going to be a research Crobat Bibarel kind of deck, as opposed to a Drizzle scoop up Drizzle Irida, you know, all of that kind of stuff.
I think where you see that being really strong is like I played Arctina at Salt Lake City with B-Barrel, and that's all that to me that's like the epitome of a B-Barrel deck,
right? Where you're just kind of swinging big and that's it.
Arceus is because you don't need anything, like almost like 80, like probably like 80% of your deck is designed to be cards that you like that you want to see at least one of on the first few turns. Where you just like you get an Arceus on board, Arceus gets your energy out, then you just need to get a Giratina V-Star on board, and for the rest of the game, all you really need to do is keep drawing a few cards that you can find a boss's orders later on or something.
Yeah.
And that's really it.
So
you don't need
the mental fatigue is a lot lower. So Frank, I didn't hear from you too much. So let me get some closing thoughts with Frank real quick. Frank, tell me, I'm going to give you a few decks and I'm going to just give me your first impression of them, maybe like a few sentences, and you can back up a little bit from the camera.
What are Are we good?
Yeah, we're
Am I
good.
close enough?
We're good.
Like, now.
So Arceus Duraludon.
I think Arc Droudon is actually a better play than some of the decks that we've talked about. If you told me that I have to play the tournament right now and give me your sixth, you know what I'm saying. I would say Lugia probably number 1, Lost Box number 2, Arc Droudon number 3. I think if I had to rank like decks that I would want to go play, I think this is just my personal opinion too. I think Mew is just really bad, and like really the worst matchup for Arc Duraludon is probably Mew. That's what gatekeeps the deck the most. I think.
Echo Horn.
You can have an okay matchup into Lugia. You do really good into Lost Box, but Mew gives you a really, really, really hard time. And I just think that Mew is just so bad. That is just me. I feel like these two and Joe, you know, have been kind of a little more positively thought word towards Mew. I think like they think it's a little bit better. Maybe not Cyrus. Yeah, me and Cyrus are in the camp of just like Mew sucks. So I think Arc Duraludon is a pretty good play, and I might even play it honestly.
It's not that hard to play too. So it's a easy deck.
Dumb, so it's really easy to pick up.
It's really nice to start the tournament and say, "Oh, I'm playing Arceus Duraludon. Well, I hope I get good matchups."
So yeah, I like it a lot. I think if you're thinking of playing Arc Dur, if you're comfortable with it, I think it's a great play.
Next deck, Regigigas.
I still haven't given up on Weezing yet. I think Weezing's cool.
Regigigas. Give me Regigigas.
Oh, Regigigas.
Yeah.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Just fire it off.
It's Frank.
Yeah, Regigigas is cool. I think it's a good deck. I think if you're a seasoned Regigigas player, I think it's totally, if it's a comfort pick for you, I think you should definitely play it because I think it's not terrible either. I don't think Stoutland gives it the business as much as people think it does.
Stoutland's fine for Reggies. It's fine.
Yeah, I think a lot of people won't have tested against it as much as they will other decks. So again, if you're a solid Reggie player, go play it. I think it's really good too. I just don't like that deck personally, just because it's not my style. I would play it if it was like the undisputed BDF, like Lugia is right now.
Right.
But if you like, absolutely go ahead and ship it.
Okay, so next one I have is Tina, and so tell me if I'm just true or false, right or wrong here. Tina is too hard to play right now for as good as it is. It's not good enough for the skill cap that it kind of has, in my opinion. Whereas last format was BDIF, and it was very.
I think you cannot.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. You're taking it away.
I think you cannot beat Lugia. It's atrocious into Lugia, and again, that deck is just going to be everywhere.
So it's like worse Lost Box in this meta.
I wouldn't play it.
Just switch to Lost Box. If you can play Tina, you can probably play some form of Lost Box. It's essentially a Lost Box, just with a V-Star in it.
Yeah. It's like a Lost Box with 5 dead cards.
Last one from Frank. Vikavolt Regieleki.
No.
Okay.
Nope. I tried it. Nope. You can't. Your worst matchup's Lugia, which is like they're weak to lightning. Absolutely. That's a horrible. That's just the red flag. As far as red flags go in a Pokemon deck, like huge one.
Okay, thank you for the closing thoughts with Frank. Joe, Cyrus, Andre, any of the decks that I just talked about with Frank, do any of you have like a really strong opinion about them, good or bad?
I've tested all of them besides I shouldn't say that. I've tested 50% of them. I don't know. Vikavolt is so close to being good in my opinion, but it's not good enough.
It is very close to being good, because when there was that 50-50 on or Lugia players playing Dunsparce right now, it was like actually a little better.
It's not even really the Dunsparce, it's the fact that like they can still set up under item lock.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is the biggest problem, right? They can Aurora their Archeops into the discard pile. They can research.
Yeah, Tord's out here telling people to play 4 research now in Lugia, and it's over for Vikavolt. That's the Vikavolt tech.
Yeah. What was the other one that I've tested? Oh, Duraludon. I said several times in my test group that I would never play that deck, but I actually have played a lot of Arceus Duraludon this past week. I actually think it's very, very solid.
Yeah, I actually hit you on ladder.
I think oh yeah.
Yeah, I was playing Galarian Weezing Aerodactyl for content, because I would never play that deck for anything but content. And you
power edged me for like 5 turns
you
in
passed
a row.
with just an Arceus V on your board for 4 or 5 turns, and I still lost. So that maybe that's just a testament to Duraludon's power. We don't know. We might find out this week. But
no, I do think Duraludon is solid. I think if you tech the deck correctly into Lugia, it's a coin flip, which is not a great way of looking at it. However, if you additionally dodge Mew, you're golden.
oh yeah.
Additionally, if you're saying that Lugia is already a flip in the mirror, saying that your Lugia matchup is a flip playing Duraludon is not actually that bad when your Lost Box matchup is like really good.
Okay, I really like that point though.
And Mew and go 50-50 against Lugia.
I like that point, Andre, that if you are at a point with your Lugia mirrors where you feel like it's just a coin flip anyway, then Duraludon. Duraludon makes sense.
I actually do think it is a little bit better than a coin flip.
For Duraludon?
I think it's actually the more I've tested it, I think I'm probably not gonna play Duraludon. So just full disclosure, I'm not trying to like bait anyone into that anyone should listen to me anyways, even though I'm on this show. I do think there's a way to approach the matchup. As much as Duraludon does not give you very many options, it's one of those decks where you look at your hand, you're like, okay, here are the cards that I can play, and I have to play those cards.
Right.
Because it's an RCS / VMAX deck, right? They all play similar, but this one is as straightforward.
Right. As Grant Manley said a few meta discussions ago on this channel, Arceus Duraludon has 0 player agency.
Yeah.
He put that quite gracefully.
Yeah. So yeah, I do think it's solid. I think if honestly, out of all the decks, like if you're not sure what to play, and you've played a little bit of it, I would not feel bad sending someone in with Arc Duraludon.
No, I agree.
Hit a couple Lugias that don't necessarily know how to play against it, or know how to play against certain techs, or a bad Mew player.
Hit some Reggies.
Hit
some Sablezards,
like whatever it may be. Like you can Duraludon's the ultimate cheese deck. Like I could send my brother who's never looked at Pokemon cards into a tournament, and he could hit the right bracket
exactly
with Arc Duraludon and make it like when you have those decks that are like have some sort of wall. Like
you could just win.
Huge,
I might win.
Massive, right? Like you may just hit the decks.
It's like Bibarel. It's the Bibarel of decks. You might just hit the things you need to, so you don't have to go search for it.
I didn't know where you're going with that, but that's exactly what it is.
Oh man. Okay, so yeah, that's great. So, go ahead, Cyrus. Go ahead.
Yeah, where it's like I actually think I agree that Arctura is slightly more than a coin flip against most Lugia lists. I mean, depending on the list, like I mean, Stefan played 2 Vacuum. You definitely lose to that. But like most Lugia lists is a bit better than the 60 or than a 50-50. So like that is your reason to play Duraludon, is that it can beat other stuff and it's slightly better than 50-50 against Lugia. But in general, if your deck is actually just a 50-50 against Lugia, I disagree with the idea of like, oh, well, you might as well just play that then. Because I do think that
Lugia's a better matchup than everything else anyways. Yeah.
Lugia beats everything else. No one else knows how to beat it. So, I mean, I think you're better off. And it has more versatility than almost any deck in the format of the Lost Box.
Right. I was kind of looking at it as if you had the same matchup spread, but you're not the BDIF with the target on its back, then that's the benefit Duraludon has to kind of even it out.
There are lots of different reasons to play different decks too.
But I do think Duraludon has, in general, like I think Lugia, like you can't have much. If you go 50-50 against Lugia, you can't really have a better matchup spread against other stuff than Lugia, in my opinion. Like, as far as any deck that I have possibly seen. Like, including Duraludon. Like, I mean, sure, Duraludon beats Lost Box, but you do lose to Mew. You lose to Reggie with Path. You don't have a very good Giratina matchup. You lose to Kyurem, which had multiple day 2s. Your Palkia matchup is pretty 50-50 if they're good. So I do think that, like, overall, and I mean, you still can lose the Lost Box, not free. I mean,
sure.
They might just throw it or Amazing Rayquaza at you, and then you're like, oh, I guess I don't have Lost Box.
Or Crabominable, the Singapore box list from 3 months ago.
So, like, I do think that, like, if your deck just goes 50-50 against Lugia, and you have the option to play Lugia, and you also are considering Lugia, you should probably play Lugia.
Cool. Okay, so final wrap-up question will go around for these. I want to talk about not necessarily what will get the most day twos, but what decks do you think will convert the best? So, for example, Cyrus, they were part of an incredible Arceus Gudra conversion rate back for, was it Peoria or SLC? Okay. So, Arceus Gudra had like 32 people play it day one and like 10 made day two or something like that. It was like close, it was around a 30% or something conversion rate because the meta was just so unprepared for Arceus Gudra because half of the internet thought it was a meme still. So what do you think will be the three best decks with the three decks with the best conversion rates going into Toronto this weekend? We'll start with Cyrus. We'll go Cyrus, Andre, Frank, Joe.
Okay, like I want to say Lugia, but like also Lugia is gonna be the most played deck in the room,
So it's very hard.
Like, in considering, like I think it might not actually like numerically have the highest conversion,
but it'll
rate,
have the
but,
hard numbers.
Consider how many players they're like, but like when you consider like how the most popular deck in the room normally converts to day two, I would say it'll probably have like,
so well, okay, so we'll give it a number one with an asterisk. Sure.
Yeah. And then after that, I mean, I guess you have to consider some like secret plays to
well, like a lot of times recently, at least with the North American groups, like we've seen a lot of groups secret play just be the meta deck that everybody else didn't realize was the call. Like when a couple groups bring Reggie or a couple groups brought Duraludon or, you know, so.
Yeah. So I'd say Sanders deck, or like other control variants. I guess control decks I think will have a very high conversion rate. And I think there'll be like more of them than there usually is, which also leads to like I think it's like control decks notoriously are like the safest day one plays, because of you get the extra addition of like it's so hard to play against control as a lot of decks, so a lot of your opponents are just gonna make mistakes that you can capitalize on.
Right.
So I think control will have like super high conversion rate. Definitely not Reggie's. Honestly, okay, I haven't tested it at all this format.
Sounds
great.
great.
I think it's terrible. And I think it's terrible.
That's a good
deck.
start.
This is great.
However, like just boring generic Kyurem lists made day two at Brazil, hitting and beating a lot of Lugias. So I'm gonna say Kyurem because they like clearly it's not as bad against Lugia as as like it seems like it would be. And you know I'm gonna say, and I don't think there's gonna be a lot of it because I think like people have or mostly almost every like the general populace of Pokemon is not gonna play Kyurem. So I think it'll be a relatively low size of them, and clearly Kyurem is just a good enough solid deck that is relatively easy enough to play that I think it'll have a decent conversion rate.
Quick note on Kyurem, I've been less harsh on it than most of the community has been the past couple weeks, but in my experience, yeah, some games Lugia just 6-0s it. Like, it's not even a competition. But when you look at the hard numbers, like, there's also a lot of times where Kyurem just runs hot on turn one and then Lugia doesn't come back from it and they get the wash energy and stuff, you know, like and so maybe it's like a 40-60 to Lugia in actual data, but like what isn't a 40-60 to Lugia right now? Like Kyurem is still kind of like I can blow up whatever's on the other side of the board kind of deck, so it's great for day one of a regionals.
So that's my third. My third is Kyurem.
Awesome. Thank you, Cyrus. On to Andre. Same question.
Kyurem's actually a really good one. Just because, like, if you're talking pure conversion rate, it makes sense because of exactly what Cyrus said. So I'm still going to go with Lugia with the asterisk for the first one, which is going to be a cop-out answer, maybe for you two as well.
Sure, yeah.
The
communal number one.
I put Lost Box at the second one. Although I think it could in theory be the third most popular deck. I think in online tournaments it frequently is. I think the deck overall is difficult to play. It's also difficult to play in person when you have to deal with the actual motions of going through the games. Like a lot of people who aren't like really prepared playing with the physical cards could run into a lot of situations where they're tying.
All the lost zone and stuff.
Yeah, or just I think they lend themselves more to like experienced players.
Absolutely.
So I think the overall player base, so people who are going to bring Lost Box probably know what they're doing with it. It's not a pick up and play deck, like a lot of decks in the format. And the next one that I'm going to pick, the most pick up and play deck, Arceus Duraludon. I think a decent amount of people are just going to cheese their way through day one with Arc Duraludon. I don't think it has near what. I don't think it should have ever won a regional or got second at a regional. Like the deck's so bad, but I also said the deck is good because it's very straightforward, and sometimes it has a lot of HP, it has no weakness, right?
That's
I
good.
feel like it's not addressed enough that we have a 330 HP
No weakness, no special energy.
the wall that's attack goes through everything. Like
And no weakness.
and no weakness.
Just add that
right?
one more
Like,
time,
it's
yeah.
the highest HP with no weakness, attack that goes through everything, and is immune to special energy.
And that's exactly enough to one-shot regular Pokemon Vs.
Yeah,
It
it's
sounds
exactly
great.
enough. And then
This deck
and
sounds
then the
busted.
pre-evolution also having that resistance, like it has like it's a very solid deck. It just has been farmed by Mew since its existence.
Yeah.
And Mew is, I don't know, Mew is okay right now. It's a fine play, like I said. I don't want to turn anyone away from playing Mew.
Mews will make day 2. It'll be fine.
Like, there's still going to be tons of Mews in day 2, or a handful of Mews in day 2, whatever it may be, because Mew is also a very cheese deck too.
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, the turn 1 kills and everything.
If your opponent has a bad start, Mew's the best deck in the world, right? Because it just punishes bad starts more than any other deck.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
leave
you,
it at that.
Andre.
You're up.
All
Yep.
right.
Holy moly! You can see the preview down there, right? Like that's what they're gonna see on the screen. You
Yeah,
want them to see it.
I've
Oh.
already planned that I'm using
thing they
Frank.
can't tell.
I'm using Frank for the thumbnail. I'm already guaranteed that.
I'm gonna go control, Lost Box, Zoroark box.
Well, I will be like 4 people playing.
I'll be providing no context.
Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. I won't elaborate.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not gonna probably Lugia control and probably Lost Box. I'd say.
Awesome.
Like, I don't think you're factoring in the Zoroark players that are gonna.
We're not talking. We're not.
like coin flip.
No, you can't.
With Tangle
No.
in their decks.
No.
Listen, all I'll say is there's a Twitter thread of Mike Boucher and Finnegan Lynch discussing teching in the non-V Hisuian Zoroark for the mirror match of Zoroark Stage 1.
Frame that and put it in a museum. I bet.
So, thank you guys for being guests on the show. I've never called it a show, but Andre called it a show about 20 minutes ago, and it kind of just took off, and that's the thing now. So thank you guys for being here for the show. Subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content, sponsors, Discord, all that things, and I'll put the guests' Twitters in the description if they'd like me to, and we'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.